meta has rapidly been shifting every patch with huge systematic changes and lots of adjustments to champions and runes. The most notable changes are the attack speed cap increasing from 2.5 to 3, the domination keystone buffs, and the nerfs to Bloodsong and Zezak's Realm Spike. Here is my 25.s1.4 support solo queue tier list. With all of those changes, we are finally moving away from the tank/mage meta. As for support, mages are being pushed out of the role due to the Zezak nerfs. Pocket enchanters have become dominant because of the attack speed cap increase, and champions who can utilize the domination keystones are also thriving. For this tier list, I'm only going to cover champions A and above, starting with Leona. Leona is one of the most standard engaged supports where her strengths lie in her CC and her natural resistances from her W. She is great at locking down an enemy with her chain stuns. Her biggest weakness is her range and her issue of initially landing an ability. Because her range abilities are skill shots, it's difficult to catch a carry if they're playing super behind. Due to this, Leona has a lot of hard counters, which is why I have her in low A. While she is great, there are other melee supports that are a lot more reliable and just better. Zilean is a utility support that provides value through buffs and debuffs. He will always be decent in most metas and can fit into most comps because everyone can benefit from his utility. His best matchups are into engaged champs and his worst are enchanters. Soraka is an enchanter that specializes in healing. She will always be great in solo queue because of how much a game gets warped into dealing with her. Because Soraka can solo carry a teamfight, games start to become centered around her, and being able to have that much pressure makes her an amazing solo queue pick. She is similar to Sona in regards to being able to carry, but Soraka is a lot better because of her stronger laning phase and smoother power curve. She can work well with most champions because everyone can benefit from health, but she is really bad into poke heavy comps as her kit revolves around landing Q. Although Zazak's got nerfed, Vel'Koz is the best mage and is strong enough to land in the A tier. His buffs in 14.22, where his E and R cooldown were reduced, were amazing, and now he's in a great spot. The thing that makes Vel'Koz different from the other mages is his true damage. When mage supports fall behind, they feel terrible because their items are expensive and they need them to do damage, but his true damage makes it so it's not as bad. He can do tons of damage, but it's hard to play well. Rakan got buffed in patch 25.3 where his W cooldown was lowered at earlier ranks. He has been struggling for a while now, and his biggest problem was that tanks were just out-sustaining his engages. But now that we are moving away from tank meta, Rakan is strong again. He is an engaged support that specializes in movement and sustain. He makes up for his lack of resistances by outmaneuvering his enemies. His biggest weakness is his range and unreliability pre-6. You can react to his engage pretty easily before his ult, so it can be easy to neutralize the lane. Rakan is better as a counter pick because there are a lot of champions that can deny him out of his engage. Nami is the jack of all trades enchanter that can do a bit of everything. She has a nice mix of utility and buffs which makes her fit well into most drafts. Nami was very strong in the mage and tank meta because she synergizes really well with caster champions and is the best user of Mandate. Now that we are moving away from that, she is not as strong but still a solid pick. Out of all the enchanters, she is one of the better blinds because of how versatile her kit is. Maokai is one of the best engage supports because of how reliable his engages are. He does not have a lot of natural resistances compared to most tank supports, but it's easily made up by his ability to guarantee lockdown a player and to zone areas. His biggest weakness is his range, which makes his laning not that great, but post laning he provides a lot of control for his team. Maokai tends to get stat checked in lane by other engaged supports, so he is best into ranged supports. Senna is one of the most unique supports in that she is a ranged AD carry. She is great in solo queue because of her solo agency and her ability to carry games without having to rely on her teammates as much. Senna's biggest weakness is how squishy she is early. If she's able to make it out of a lane, she can take over a game, but in the current meta, a lot of lane bullies are strong. She is best as a counter into a lane where there is very little kill pressure. Bard is usually going to be pretty high in most metas because of how impactful he is in game. He has the ability to solo win teamfights and can build pretty much anything, which makes him able to abuse any item that's strong. Like Senna, Bard's biggest weakness is his laning phase. If he's able to make it out even, he can take over a game, but a lot of lane bullies are strong. The main difference between Senna and Bard is that Bard doesn't get punished as hard when he's behind because he's all about utility. Nautilus received buffs in this patch where his Q damage was increased by 15 at all ranks. I feel like the 15 damage was insane and now he is very strong. He is the gold standard of hook champs that has everything you would want from range, lockdown, and CC. Nautilus is an early game champion that can always find angles to get ahead. If he falls behind, he becomes very weak because he doesn't have a lot of tank stats, which is problematic because he throws himself in the front line. Nautilus is a lot better as a counter pick into range supports rather than a blind because a lot of melee supports can stat check him. Alistar is one of the most reliable engaged supports that can solo tank an entire team. His point and click CC that are knockups makes it so that he can almost always guarantee lockdown at least one enemy. His biggest weakness, like most engaged supports, is his lack of range. Alistar can be exploited pretty hard in lane, which is why he should only be picked as a counter. He counters most of the meta engage supports, which is why I have him in the middle of A. Neeko is a very underrated support that has a lot of potential. She is considered a mage, but plays more like an engage champ with her dubious gameplay. Neeko is one of the hardest counters to a lot of the meta hook and engage champs where it's actually unplayable for them. There's a lot of tech you need to know for her to be played at her best, but once you learn her interactions with different champions, you can do some pretty crazy things. Braum Taric, you know the vibes. They should only be picked as a counter pick. They can 1v9 in the right comp, but they can also be really useless in the wrong comp. Taric has less requirements to be good, as he's best into teams where he can auto a lot, whereas Braum needs a good ADC pairing along with a front-to-back enemy comp. I grouped them together because they function very similarly. Pyke had an indirect nerf and buff where Bloodsong lost 2% increase in damage for melees, but Hail of Blades was buffed so that the melee attack speed was increased with the cooldown being decreased. I think that he's still the same strength-wise. Pyke is one of the best champions to play in solo queue because of his feast or famine playstyle. There is really no other support champion that can snowball games as hard as him. Most Pykes are one-tricks because of how hard he is mechanically to play. You can blind pick him every game because even in his bad matchups, you should be able to find an angle to kill early. Janna is the best disengaged enchanter whose kit revolves around speed, healing and shielding, and CC. She counters most of the meta engage supports but struggles against champions that outrange her. Janna feels pretty strong this patch, but there are a lot of meta champions that counter her pretty hard. You can probably get away with blind picking her because she's so strong, but she is best as a counter pick into engage supports or dive comps. Rell received nerfs in 25-3 where her base health and armor growth was decreased, but despite this she is still super strong. She's one of the best engage supports because of her strong laning phase and explosive AoE CC that can solo carry teamfights. Rell had a mini rework done last split where they changed her kit so that her combos aren't guaranteed, but she still feels very oppressive. She has bad matchups into disengaged champs, but she's so strong overall you can get away with blind picking her. Ever since the bug with Karma's RQ not working with Axiom Arcanist was fixed, Karma has become one of the strongest supports. She is an enchanter that has a very strong laning phase due to her range and unique kit where she has her ult starting at level 1. Traditionally, Karma suffered from win lane lose lane syndrome, but because she is able to use Axiom Arcanist so well, this is no longer the case. When you combine Axiom Arcanist with Revitalize, Enchanter Karma has insane numbers. Not only do your runes carry you in the early game, but it makes you scale super hard. If you are going to play Karma, build her as an enchanter and you'll understand why she's OP. That was all the S tier champs. I decided to add an S plus tier because these champs do not feel the same strength as the other S champs. Kicking it off, we have Poppy. Like Pyke, Poppy was indirectly affected by the Bloodsong and Hail of Blade changes, but is still strong. Poppy has had 3 nerfs in the past 3 patches, but is still one of the best supports in the game. How disgusting is that? The reason why she's so strong is because she not only counters most of the supports with the dash, but she also does way too much damage. She can pretty much solo a squishy target while building tank if she can get her slam on a wall. It's weird that Riot wants to phase out mages because they don't want high damage output from supports, while Poppy can stay this way for this long. She's better off as a counter pick, but is strong enough that you can blind pick her. Elise was adjusted in this patch where her burst power was lowered and her spider form was buffed so that her jungling could be better. Despite these changes, Elise support is still broken. I think Elise and Poppy share very similar strengths and balancing problems. They are OP because of how much damage they do, and it's hard to adjust their numbers because they were originally made to be in other roles. As a result, their base numbers are way too high for supports, which is why they are so strong. Elise is currently a great blind pick because people have been playing her a lot more in jungle and she's just insane at the moment. Thresh got buffs in 25.3 where his base health and flay damage was increased. I think you guys already know my take on Thresh since I've repeated myself so many times, but after the buffs he is super strong. I felt like these buffs were honestly pretty unneeded, but it allows for Thresh to deal with a lot of the new domination changes and lane bully meta. Thresh is always one of the best blind picks in the game because of how much utility and versatility he has. At the very top, we have Lulu. She was nerfed this patch where her W bonus attack speed was decreased and cooldown increased. Her E damage and shield strength were both also decreased. Even after these changes, she is still by far the strongest support. Riot missed the mark on this nerf because I think it's less about her buffs in the mid and late game and more about how strong she is in lane. It feels like Lulu's base stats are just a little too high, and I think the right way of nerfing her is to make her squishier in lane. It's pretty crazy for Lulu to have such a high win rate because normally she needs to be paired with an auto heavy AD carry to do well, but she's currently so broken you can just pick her every game and do well regardless. In this patch, she is a pick or ban champion. That concludes my tier list. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.